Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Poetry 1, course code 403, lecture 21. Let's have a recap of lecture 20. Rather, we have finished with the text of Paradise Lost. We have seen that the text of book 1, Paradise Lost, and let's have a recap of all the text, that whatever the things we discussed in that, we will have a kind of a summary of Paradise Lost, book 1. Milton starts Paradise Lost with an invocation to the Muse. So first we find the his invocation. He says that he invokes the heavenly Muse and Holy Spirit. Instead of invoking in the name of instead of invoking the one of the 9 muses of mythology, he does not inspire, he does not invoke those 9 muses, which was the tradition in those days, or which was the tradition in the case of classical writers also. Since the subject matter, the content matter of his poetry is different, of his poem Paradise Lost is different, so he does not invoke the muses. He invokes the heavenly muse, he invokes the Holy Spirit. Then we had the mentioning of the theme, that it is based on the theme of the poem is man's disobedience and loss of heaven. So as a result of the man's disobedience, because man was restrained from eating the fruit of that forbidden tree, and some critics, they believe that it is the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and by eating that man had wisdom and knowledge, but as a result of eating, as a result of this disobedience, he lost heaven. The contents of the poems, they extend from line 27 to 83, and it includes the cause. It tells that it was basically the result of the temptation of serpent, and that serpent, it was not originally serpent, it was the Satan in the serpent that tempted Eve to eat the fruit of that forbidden tree, and then Satan's revolt against God, and he was expelled with his followers from heaven. And now when the poem opens after the invocation and mentioning of the theme, we see that Satan is lying in hell with his followers, and around him he is looking around at the fiery lake of hell. He is lying in the lake of hell. Then Satan's first speech is there from line 84 to 124. We discussed earlier also that these speeches of Satan are very famous. They are often quoted also. They include, there are certain qualities, there are certain great qualities of that are included, that Satan exhibits through his speeches, and these qualities include the unconquerable will. He is determined, he has got strong determination, his resolution is greater, and nothing or nobody can change that, not even the torment and the misery of the hell. Then he advises his followers to sustain rebellion. He addresses Beelzebub and his followers, and he advises them to sustain the rebellion because of the, and he says that they have to fire, they have to give energy to their rebellious attitude by the misery and suffering of the hell. So these speeches, they reveal the character of Satan. Then Beelzebub's reply from line 125 to 156, we have Beelzebub's reply. Beelzebub replies to Satan, and he immediately recognizes Satan's determination in his speech, and but on the other hand, the kind of the grief that he has expressed, Beelzebub has expressed in his speech, in his reply to Satan's speech, that has got lots of grief, that has got bitterness in it over their fall, and he is discontent. His speech shows the discontentment of the contest that they have launched against the Almighty. Then we have Satan's second speech from line 157 to 191. There is a servitude, there is and they wanted to irritate the Almighty by declaring this war, by deceiving the man on earth. Saturn recommends to summon his followers. He gathers their courage. He asks them to gather their courage from this opportunity, from this occasion, and he says that they should take benefit of this opportunity. Then we had the description of Saturn from line 192 to 241, and different comparisons were there in order to understand the great stature or the physique of Saturn. We had different comparisons that we will discuss again. We have discussed them in the text, and now we will discuss them again when we will talk about the epic similes. Then Saturn is permitted to rise, and the major comparisons that are given are in some of them he is compared to the mythological figures where there are certain monsters or giants who have got lots of for example, Typhon, who has 100 serpent heads. Then another monster type was there. Saturn was compared, who had 100 heads and 100 hands and 50 heads. Then Saturn was compared to a sea beast, which is very large, and which when it sometimes came to the surface, the seamen or the boatmen, they usually mistook it for some island. Then Saturn is permitted to rise. He is permitted to come out of that fiery lake of hell, and it is by the permission of the Almighty. But Saturn and Beelzebub, when they fly to land, they feel very proud. They feel very joyous over their victory, that they have come out of that fiery lake of hell on their own, through their own strength. Hell is described. Then another of Saturn's speech is there. It extends from from line 242 to 270. Once again, Beelzebub replies to him, and this speech of Saturn from line 242 to 264, this is a soliloquy. Saturn talks to himself. He talks about different things, and then the last 6-7 lines, that was an address to Beelzebub. Beelzebub makes a reply to this speech of Saturn's, because he had addressed him in lines 271 to 282. Then there is a description of Saturn on shore. We come to know that the land area, it also burns. It's not that there is fire only in the lake of hell, that is a fiery lake of hell, and he has given a very good comparison that if there was liquid fire in the lake of hell, there was solid fire on the land. Saturn bids very sarcastically bids his followers to rise from that stupefied condition, because they were still unconscious because of the misery of the fall, of having been fallen from heaven. The rebel angels, they are very obedient to the orders, to the commands of their master, and they rise, and we discussed this in lines 331 to 375. And we come to know that these angels who have been thrown down into the hell from heaven, they lost their heavenly names, and so far in the hell they don't have any names, and they are plentiful. In order to understand the strength or the vastness of their number, the infiniteness of their number, Milton has given different similes. He has compared them to the autumn leaves, because autumn leaves, then when they are shed in during the autumn season, they are countless, they are numberless, they are so numerous that everywhere when we go around we see these autumn leaves. Then locusts, these fallen angels are compared to the locusts. Finally, they are compared to the barbarian hordes. So all these similes have been used by Milton to represent or to show the strength of Saturn's army, to show the number of these fallen angels who were following Saturn. Then description of the major fallen angels have been given in lines 376 to 521, and there is also the mentioning of the Syrian and Arabian deities, and the gods of Greece, they have also been mentioned. Then we had another of Saturn's speech from lines 622 to 662. It is, he says that in these lines, he says that this battle or the contest that they had against the Almighty, it was fatal, but it was not inglorious. And he says that it resulted only because when we were living in heaven, we could not imagine, we did not know the true strength of the Almighty. He was all peaceful then, and we did not have any idea of the true strength of the Almighty. And he says that who could have anticipated when the army it is prepared and all those battalions there, all those soldiers are standing in front of him. He says that who could have anticipated that this type of army, this type of large army could ever be defeated. Then he says that who could ever not think that this army cannot regain that seat back. Then as a result of Saturn's speech, there are certain actions taken from in lines 662 to 651, and in these lines we come to know that there is the building of the pandemonium. Pandemonium, as we discussed earlier also, that this is a word created by Milton to represent the castle of these demons. It basically, there is a state of confusion in the hell in that palace of pandemonium. It is built by Mamun. There are three groups of the fallen angels. They are divided into three parts, and they start their work on the building of the pandemonium, and they do this work since they are spirits, so they say they do this work very quickly. And Milton, in some of the lines, he makes comparison also. He says that men would do that work in ages. In the same work, those spirits, they did in only a very short time. Then there were the rumors of the creation of the new world, and in line 752 to 798 the council was summoned, and all the soldiers, the warriors who had gathered there in the form of the battalions and different divisions, they gathered round Saturn, and in order to make the readers understand their number and the way they were present there, in order to give the visual quality to this, Milton has given the comparison of these soldiers. He has compared it to the bees who are swarming, and then those, as these fallen angels, these warriors and soldiers, they entered the palace of pandemonium, their size was reduced to those of the dwarfs, smallest dwarfs or pygmies or fairies. Finally, the council began, and with this, Book 1, Paradise Lost, ends. Now we will have a look at some of the important aspects, some of the perspectives through which we can discuss these incidents of, through which we can discuss the text of Paradise Lost, Book 1. First of all, the style of Paradise Lost. It is often said that his style is grand, it is sublime, it has got the splendor, the grandeur. So let's discuss some of the points, that how it is different and what are the things that make it different from any from the style of any ordinary poem. In Paradise Lost, Milton presents indomitable personality of most of the characters, not only one. Saturn is unsurpassable, exemplary, having the great qualities. Then on the other hand, if we look at the other characters, like there is mentioning of the God's son, Christ. Once again, indomitable, having the indomitable personality, but we do not know much about God or Christ or Adam in Book 1. We have, most of the times we come to know about Beelzebub and Satan and his some of his fallen angels, and that was a type of narration. They do not do something exactly. It is only Satan who makes his speeches, lengthy speeches, through which we come to know about his character. Then the style of the Paradise Lost, it is simply sublime. It is serious in its tone, the subject matter, the way it elevates. It is serious, it is sober. So it is sublime. It has got that grand style of being an epic. It is in conformity. The style of Paradise Lost is in conformity with the theme. It has got the perfect combination. The style and theme, they match together. The style goes with the theme of the poem. Since the theme is universal, so the style is also universal. Then the careful selection of words. Milton very carefully selects these words, and these words are selective, they are suggestive and compact. They suggest and they are precise also. One word carries forth number of meanings, and it has got the underlying meanings also. Then in the verse we have solemn and sonorous quality. It is musical. It is famous for it's not only words put together for some sublime reason. They are melodious. They have got melodious quality in the lines. His poem is full of splendor. It is grand in its style, and it attains that majesty. So there had been lots of critiques on Paradise Lost, and most of the critics, most of the great writers, they agree with his, or they acknowledge his genius as they acknowledge his genius, and they acknowledge his control over writing. Then another important factor that makes his style great, that makes his style sublime and serious, that is the elusiveness. It is not that he talks about something which is only artificial, which is only in the air. He does not talk about the fantasies and the fairy land. He talks about something concrete, something that happened, that really took place. So the source of the poem is not any imagination. And he gives references from different sources, from Greek mythology, from the classical writers, and even from his contemporary society. For example, we see that he mentions that the shield of Saturn, it looks like an orb of moon as when it is seen from the telescope of Galileo. So that was a recent invention. He knew about it and he mentioned that. So it's not that he mentions references, he mentions allusions only from classical sources. It is full of allusions. It is full of allusions from classical sources. It is full of allusions from mythology. It is full of allusions from the contemporary world also. He has vast imagination, and this he represents by using different sorts of adjectives to the nouns. Now nouns are already, they are very carefully chosen, they are carefully selected, they are compact and they are suggestive. Still he uses certain adjectives also in order to add the meaning, in order to add the effect of the words. Moreover, he uses the combination of concrete versus abstract. So all these factors, they make the style of Paradise Lost grand, they make it sublime, they make it noble, because he is talking, the theme of his poem is something very noble, sublime, elevated. Now the next perspective from which we can look at Paradise Lost, what is an epic? We discussed epic earlier also when we talked about the Fairy Queen. An epic, we talked that an epic is long narrative poem about a hero containing the following elements: in media res, an invocation to the muse, the battles, the romance, supernatural elements, journeys, lists, descent to the underworld, epic similes. So all these elements are the constituent parts of an epic. A long narrative poem, since Paradise Lost consists of 12 books, so it is a long book containing different parts. So there are 12 books within this poem, so it is divided into 12 parts. It is a narration. Yes, it narrates the acts of Adam and Eve, that they ate the fruit, and the resulting consequences. So it is based on the narration of human actions. Then the story, yes, it contains a story of the disobedience of man. Then it contains parts and books. As we just discussed that it contains 12 parts, so it is long, it is in the form of narration, it has a story, and it contains different parts in the form of books. Then a great leader who possesses great character qualities larger than life. Now the characters in Paradise Lost, so far we know about Christ, Adam, Eve and Satan. They are larger than life. They have got all the character, the qualities, the courage, the qualities of a great person. In medias res refers to middle of things. Literally it means in the middle of things. So the epic, when we look at Paradise Lost, it begins in the middle, because this particular element refers that the epic begins in media res and then flashes back. So the flashbacks are used later on in some part of the book to events that took place before the narrator's current time setting. So whatever had happened earlier in the poem, that is flashed back at the somewhere in the middle or maybe at the end. But it does not start right from the beginning. If we look at Paradise Lost, it has a proper beginning, and we do not see Paradise Lost began from that beginning. It begins in the middle. When the book opens, we see that Satan and his followers, they are lying in hell, and later the readers come to know, when they read the rest of the parts of Paradise Lost, they come to know that what had happened. We had some instances where we get to know that, okay, fine, it was Adam and Eve who and they were deceived by the serpent. So we come to know about all these incidents later on, even the creation of the earth and Satan's revolt. So all these things are described in the book later on. And why Satan and other angels are lying in hell, when the book opens, we do not know about this. That is revealed through certain speeches, through the way the characters talk. We are told about that gradually later on, step by step. Invocation to the muse. One of the important element of any epic is invocation to the muse. In Paradise Lost also, Milton seeks help from the Holy Spirit, from the heavenly muse. Basically it is the help from gods or goddesses, because an epic is a poem that is of national significance, and the poets, they feel that since it is something great they are going to talk about, they are going to talk about the importance of some, they are going to talk about the exploits of some great hero, some great person of national significance. So they seek help, so they ask for help the one or more of the muses of mythology. But the theme of Paradise Lost is different from any ordinary epic. So Milton does not invoke in the name of any of those muses. He invokes in the name, he invokes the heavenly muse, he invokes the Holy Spirit, he seeks help from the Holy Spirit. Since the subject matter, the theme of his poem is universal, so his invocation is also different from the ordinary epics. So A Paradise Lost has the element of any ordinary epic, it has invocation in it. Battle or deeds of valor. Does great deeds in battle or undertakes an extraordinary journey or quest. So the hero or the characters of the epic, they do great deeds in battle, or they undertake an extraordinary journey or quest. Satyr undertakes the battle against the Almighty. So this is the first war, Adam's battle against Satan, then the journey of the spirits. So all these are the battles or the deeds of valor that are the important constituents of any epic. Then the supernatural elements, the gods or other supernatural or fantastic beings take part in the action of the story. If we look at Paradise Lost, since we have read the text of Paradise Lost, we saw that there is inclusion of spirits, angels are there. Even Satan, Beelzebub and all the rest of the angels, they are all spirits, so they are all heavenly bodies. So as far as this particular element is concerned, Paradise Lost is rich in the use of supernatural elements. Journeys, the setting is broad and often includes supernatural realms, especially the land of the dead. As far as this type of journey is concerned, into the supernatural realms, it is very obvious that when the book opens, book 1 opens, we find Satan lying in hell, which is a supernatural element at present for us. For human beings, it is a supernatural world. And later on, the journey in the world will also take place in later books. So Paradise Lost is an epic if we look at the journeys or the battles that take place in Paradise Lost. Then epic similes, elaborately extended comparisons relating to heroic events to simple everyday events using like, so, as, and just as. So there are comparisons in Paradise Lost also. We find a number of comparisons that is an evidence that epic similes have been used by Milton in Paradise Lost. So first of all, the comparison of fallen angels to leaves and locusts and barbarian hordes, all these are the symbolic of the use of extended similes. So Milton uses epic similes. He was aware of this convention and he used these epic similes in Paradise Lost. Then when we have the description of Satan, in the description of Satan, he is compared to different mythological figures. He is compared to a sea beast. His broad shield is compared to the moon when it is seen from the telescope of Galileo. So again, an extended simile has been used. Moreover, the face of Saturn has been compared to the sun when it is eclipsed. So at a number of places, since in book 1 we have the setting of the poem in hell, in the abstract world of which nobody has any experience. So in order to make us understand the types of things there and the number of characters, Milton uses different similes for us to understand, for the readers to understand the size, the nature, the number, and the type of things that are present there. So all these similes once again are a part of any conventional epic. So these extended comparisons, these epic similes are present in Paradise Lost also. So these were some of the elements of epic, that what is an epic and what are the different types of, what are the different elements that constitute an epic. Let's have a look at Paradise Lost. We have been discussing different points, but let's have a look at Paradise Lost, that can we really consider it an epic? The theme of Paradise Lost, usually the theme of an epic is of national nature. It has the national significance. If we look at the theme of Paradise Lost, this is universal in nature. So right at the beginning, Milton claims that he is going to talk about things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. So he mentions very clearly that he is going to talk about something that has not been dealt with in prose or in rhyme, or nobody has talked about the such universal themes as he is going to talk about, because he is going to talk about Adam. He is going to talk about the fall of Adam, and Adam is the father of all mankind. So his theme is universal, is in nature, and it is different from the themes of other epics, because other epics, the classical epic poems, they had the theme of national significance. If we look at the unity of action, the unity of action is that all the actions, they lead to one thing. So in Paradise Lost also, this is the disobedience of man, and all the threads, they link it to that one action. So that fall of man, or that act of disobedience, all the incidents in the poem, they are related to that one action. So there is unity of action in Paradise Lost. Beginning, middle and end of Paradise Lost. One of the important element of any epic is having a proper beginning, middle and end, and the epic begins with the middle, and that beginning, the start of the action is narrated later on through flashback. So this is the case with Paradise Lost also. It begins in the middle. We see that Satan and his followers, they are lying in hell. They are called rebels, and they announced everlasting, unending, eternal war against God. So the book 1, since it is the beginning of the poem, it starts in the middle, and later on we are told about the beginning of the Paradise Lost. Then invocation. One of the important characteristic of any epic is invocation. The poets invoke, the poets seek help from the muses, from the gods or goddesses. Milton invokes the Holy Spirit, Milton invokes the heavenly muse. Then the characters have heroic qualities. In Paradise Lost, there are not many characters, there are very few, but when we look at these characters, they exhibit heroic qualities. We have Adam, Eve, Christ, the Son of God, and Satan. These have, all these characters, they do have heroic qualities. Then the speeches of elaborate length. In this case, if we look at the speeches of Satan, so far we have read book 1 only. If we look at the speeches of Satan, they are extended. They extend over lines and lines after lines. Sometimes maybe more than 100. So the next element is speeches of elaborate length. If we look at the speeches of Satan in book 1, since we have read the text of book 1 only, we find that he made numerous speeches. Probably there are 5 or 6, and they are very long. We have elaborate speeches, and those speeches, they reflect his character also, and they represent the qualities of a great person. Illustrate from classical epics. He draws his sources, his incidents, his metaphors, similes, and the turns of phrases from classical epics. So the poem Paradise Lost is full of classical allusions, and he draws these illustrations from different classical poems. He draws these the incidents, the metaphors, similes, and the turns of phrases. He draws them from various sources of the classical epics, from the classical literature. If we look at the style, we talked about the style of Paradise Lost a bit earlier, that in Paradise Lost, Milton uses lofty style. It is elevated and it is grand. It is not like the style of any poem, any ordinary poem. Usually epics have grand, sublime and elevated style. The narration of human actions, the epic poems usually revolve around the narration of human actions. Paradise Lost also revolves around the narration of human actions. The center of the poem is, or the crux of the poem is, the disobedience of Adam and Eve, and all the threads, all the other incidents, they lead to that one human action. Then human interest. Since it is concerned with the fall of Adam and Eve, with the fall of Adam, since Adam was the father of all mankind, so it captures human interest. We just discussed the sublimity that in the execution of his poem, the way he wrote, his selection of the meter, his selection of words, his selection of syntax, that makes it sublime. Then the moral tone. Usually epics have a moral lesson also. So in this poem, Milton, he uses, since it is religious in nature, so he uses the moral tone in the poem, and that revolves around, because there is love for the Almighty in man, and that love he has discovered after the act of disobedience, and through that love man would be able to regain that seed, to get paradise back. So another important element of any epic is the moral of the poem. In Paradise Lost also, there is a moral lesson. It has the moral tone. It instructs. It teaches it teaches a moral lesson to its readers. Now, it's not that it is all grand, because when there are favors, when there are appreciations of any work, at the same time there are people who oppose those points. Some critics, they do not agree with or they do not consider Milton a great poet. They say that Paradise Lost is not an epic poem. They say that it is not heroic. It does not deal with a battle. It only deals with the act of disobedience. It does not include any battle or any wars. That is the crux of any epic poem. Moreover, the objection was that it ends unhappily, so it should not be considered an epic. Moreover, only 2 human characters are used in Paradise Lost, so how comes that it could be called an epic? Because in epics usually there are a number of human characters. So as far as these objections are concerned, there were certain other critics also who tried to justify these points in order to prove that Paradise Lost is really an epic poem. They say that it is heroic in nature, and it is not necessary that there should be obvious fight or battle in any. That is not the that is something unnecessary. Then it ends unhappily. The critics, they believe that since though man, when sent to this earth, when he will do the good deeds, he would be able to get the favors of God once again. So it does not end unhappily. Apparently it ends unhappily, but on the other hand, the person who is seen as the sufferer, the one who is seen as the one who is the loser, he gets that favor of God back. So Adam is happy on the other hand, and only 2 human characters are used. There are a number of other characters also, so we cannot say there are only 2 characters. Some critics, they objected that the characters like Christ and God and Satan, they also take part in the poem. Even Beelzebub, Mammon, so they also take part in the action of the poem. So this objection is also useless. It is not worth to consider Paradise Lost not an epic. Moreover, some critics, they believe that Paradise, when Milton wrote Paradise Lost, he did not do favors to English language, rather he corrupted it. Once again, this objection is discussed by different critics, and they believe it is not the corruption, it is the style, it is the elevated style that suited his theme, the theme that he was using, since his theme was universal. So he used all those classical allusions, those references, and he made use of metaphors and similes also for the understanding of the readers, to make them understand the stature, the extent of the size of the things. Then when we look at the Saturn's speeches, they constitute one of the major portion in book 1, and they are very important because they depict the character of Saturn, and we have a number of qualities of Saturn through these speeches. And we have Saturn's speeches in 2 ways. One, through Saturn's description, one through his through Milton's use of different similes for the understanding of the size and the stature of Saturn. Moreover, we come to know about his character qualities through his speeches. And in these in book 1 we have got probably 5 speeches, and in these speeches we come to know about his character. And the most dominant of his qualities are determination and resolution, since he has fallen, and he admits that they have fallen, but he says that this war, that or this contest that we had against God, it was because we were not aware of his strength, of his true strength. Now since we are aware, so he launches another battle against God, he revolts against him, and his speeches, they are reflective of his determination, of his resolution. And he possesses, though he is not on the right path, but he possesses great qualities. The moral of Paradise Lost, the thesis of Paradise Lost, if we say that we want to sum up the whole poem in a few lines, these lines could be taken from the poem in the towards the beginning of the poem. Milton says that to the height of this great argument I may assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men. Now this shows that his poem Paradise Lost is moral in nature. So this sums up the whole thing, that he is going to talk about the ways of God, that the way God deals with men, it is not unjustified, he is never unjust, rather he did all these things in order to bestow his favors on man, ताकि इंसान अपने आप को इस काबिल कर ले, अपनी सही जो वर्थ है उसको समझे और अपने आप को इस काबिल करे कि वो अल्लाह ताला की जो रहमत है, उसकी जो नेमतें हैं उनको हासिल कर सके. Then epic similes in Paradise Lost, this is another perspective through which we can look at Paradise Lost. There are a number of similes in Paradise Lost, and these similes, as we just discussed, that these similes make things easier to understand. We as readers have better understanding of things. First of all, in order to make the readers understand the type of fire that is burning in hell, Milton mentions different comparisons. Then with the description of Satan, once again we have a number of similes. He gives a comparison of Satan to a monster in the Greek mythology that has 100 hands and 50 heads. Now in order to make us understand the huge size, that somebody who has got 100 hands and somebody who has got 50 heads, how frightening that creation would appear. Then Typhon having 100 serpent heads. Then he is compared to Leviathan. Leviathan is a sea beast, and it is so huge that the seamen and the people, the sea rovers, sometimes take it for some island in order to stay on it for the night. So these comparisons, they not only represent the size of Satan, moreover they represent the type of physique it has and the type of feeling that we can have out of these. Now having 100 heads or having 100 hands and 50 heads, this is something very abnormal. This abnormality of his size makes us understand, makes us feel the seriousness or the danger of his presence. Having this 100 serpent heads, now one serpent, we are afraid of it, and a figure that has got 100 serpent heads, how fearful or how frightening that scene would be where that creature would be present. Then having 100 hands and 50 heads, what that creature can do with those 100 hands, we simply can feel scared of the situation when we imagine that. Then the Leviathan is so huge and it deceives, and since this Leviathan, it deceives the sea rovers in the same way human beings are deceived by the Satan. So that hidden nature of being tricky and risky, of danger, so all these are implied by these comparisons. Moreover, face of Satan is compared to the sun when it is eclipsed, and it is described that it appears as if the sun is eclipsed. Then the description of Satan's shield, it is described that his shield is as huge as it is the orb of moon when it is seen from the telescope of Galileo. So here it is a reference to the contemporary invention also, that he was aware of that all, and he mentioned that for describing the stature or for describing the size of the shield of Saturn. Then the description of rebel angels, when there was the description of rebel angels, Milton used a number of comparisons. उसने बहुत ज़्यादा similes इस्तेमाल किए हैं हमें ये समझाने के लिए कि वो कोई 500, 1000, 10,000 या 2000 या 2 लाख नहीं थे, वो काउंटलेस थे। और इन सिमिलीज की मदद से, जैसा कि खज़ां में जब पत्ते गिरते हैं तो उन पत्तों की तादाद का अंदाज़ा नहीं लगाया जा सकता है, वो काउंटलेस होते हैं, इनफाइनाइट होते हैं। इसी तरीके से जब कोई जैसे ग्रास ऊपर जैसी जो चीज है, लोकस आर लाइक ग्रास ऊपर, दे विल सो दीज लोकस दे आर ऑल्सो इनन्यूमरेबल, वो भी लातादाद होते हैं। इवन सिमिलरली लाइक बारबेरियन होर्ड्स, वंस अगेन दे आर नंबरलेस, दे आर uncountable. So all these similes, they make us understand, वो हमें इसके जरिए जो है इन similes को, इन comparisons को use करके हमें बताना चाह रहा है कि fallen angels जो थे, they were not some, they were not a few, they were not some, they were not many, they were innumerable. इस कदर थे कि उनकी तादाद का अंदाज़ा लगाना मुश्किल था, इस कदर थे कि इवन जो एबस है, एबस इज यूजुअली एज वी टॉक्ड अबाउट एट द बिगिनिंग ऑफ पैराडाइज लॉस्ट, कि एबस एक ऐसा स्पेस है जो कि अनएंडिंग है, ना ख़त्म होने वाला स्पेस है, जो कि डार्क है। और ये सारे जो फॉलन एंजल्स हैं वो उस स्पेस में मौजूद हैं, और फिर भी इनके लिए इस कदर है उस स्पेस में, अनलिमिटेड स्पेस में ये लोग इस कदर हैं कि इनकी तादाद का अंदाजा यहाँ से लगाया जा सकता है कि वहां पर ये इतनी कंजस्टेड, और वहां पर बीज की हमिंग की तरह की इनकी आवाज आ रही है, उनकी मर्मरिंग की तरह की इनकी आवाज आ रही है। So we have been given with the description of the fallen angels, and they have been compared to leaves, to autumn leaves. जब वो खज़ां के मौसम में जब पत्ते गिरते हैं, then they have been compared to the locusts, then they have been compared to the barbarian hordes. And not only these, I have tried to discuss here the major similes. There are other similes also that we have already discussed in the text. So here, in order to give some idea of the use of epic similes, I have mentioned here some of them. The elements of Renaissance, since Milton was a Puritan, and he came towards the end of Elizabethan age, because the Elizabethan age ended with the death of Queen in 1603. So his works embody both the spirits. The spirit of his age, Puritanism, is very much prevalent in his poetry. Not only Puritanism, because in Puritanism we had the religious attitude, we had the religious feelings, but in his poem we find the elements of Renaissance also. We talked about the elements of Renaissance earlier when we talked about the poetry of Spenser, when we talked about the analysis of Fairy Queen. It has got a spirit of adventure, there is love for beauty, there is love for richness and magnificence, there is a revival of old classical literature. So these things, they are very much evident in Paradise Lost, because we see that he has got that magnificence and there is spirit of adventure, and he mentions a number of allusions to the classical literature. And then classical mythology, yes, there are references to mythological figures also. We just discussed the mentioning of those two monsters from mythology, having 100 hands and 50 heads and having 100 serpent heads. So those are the figures from mythology. Then another element of Renaissance was the seriousness or moral earnestness. Yes, moral earnestness or seriousness or that sobriety and sublimity, that is part of the Paradise Lost. Then tradition to write in epic form. Paradise Lost is an epic. So this tradition of something that was tradition during the Renaissance, Milton uses it to write, because he was a Puritan, but he always wanted to write write an epic poem, and in a number of his poems we found his ambition, his desire, his strong motivation to write the poem, to write an epic poem. And he was in the quest of a suitable theme for the poem. First he wanted to write down about some king, about the great deeds of some king. Then he thought that it is useless to talk about the deeds of kings, because earlier writers, they have also been talking about the deeds of kings. Then he thought of writing about the man's fall, and this was something universal in nature. So once again, the theme that he chose for writing his epic, that was according to the stature, the genre that he had chosen to write. Along with these elements of Renaissance, Milton embodies the spirit of Reformation also in his poetry. In Paradise Lost, when we see Paradise Lost, Reformation was a religious movement, and it was a revolt against the authority of church. The Protestants rose against the Roman Catholic Church, and Milton was a Puritan, and we see that those religious elements in his poetry. If we look at the very theme of the poem, it is, if we look at the very substance of the poem, we find that the subject matter of the poem has been drawn from some holy book, from some scriptures. So it is not something abstract. It is not something all writer's imagination. It has got morality in it. That moral earnestness is very much present there. Then it is religious in its nature, in its very nature, and that is the reason that we find the inclusion of God and the commands of God and the rebellion against him. And so the elements of Reformation are very much prevalent in Paradise Lost. It has got that moral value, and these content matters are also drawn from some religious source, and it includes the God's authority and God's commands and the obeying or disobeying of his orders. So all these make it embody the spirit of Reformation in it. Now at one side we see that he has got the sublimity and the grand style, and with all these qualities that we have just discussed in his poetry. There are certain, because everything, no matter how hard you try, everything has got certain defects also. So some critics, they believe that there are certain defects of Milton's poetry. So with all these merits, or all these great qualities of Paradise Lost, there are certain defects also, because whenever, no matter how hard you try, no matter what type of cares you consider, still from one angle or other there have to be certain things that are not according to some rules. So if we look at Paradise Lost along with all these accomplishments, because Milton was an accomplished poet, and this was his greatest achievement in the form of Paradise Lost. And even in Paradise Lost, if we look at the character of Satan, because Satan is an abstract character, and in the real life we do not have any idea about it. So the way he has created the Satan of character through his speeches, this is remarkable. This is the proof of his ingenious. On the other hand, there are certain defects of Milton's poetry. There is lack of human interest. We do not find any everyday life incidents or things in Paradise Lost. So this lacks, Paradise Lost lacks human interest. जो हर रोज की, जो रोजमर्रा मामूल की जो चीजें हैं, जो फीलिंग्स हैं, जो छोटी छोटी बातें हैं, वो उसमें मौजूद नहीं है, बिकॉज दिस इज समथिंग अबव ऑल दोज थिंग्स. उनसे हमारी जो आम जिंदगी है उससे इसका ताल्लुक नहीं है. आम जिंदगी का है भी और नहीं भी, है इस तरह से कि ये फॉल ऑफ मैन पर बेस करती है, लेकिन ये उसकी बिगिनिंग है जो हम अभी जिस तरीके की जिंदगी गुजार रहे हैं, क्योंकि दैट वाज समथिंग दैट वी हैव बीन टोल्ड थ्रू द रिलीजियस बुक्स। हमें बुक्स से पता चलता है, या और तरह के जो पैम्फलेट्स हैं या दूसरी जो प्रोज बुक्स हैं, हमें उनसे पता चलता है कि किस तरह से फॉल ऑफ मैन कैसे हुआ और उसके बाद की क्या स्टोरी है, क्या हुआ था, और वाई सैटर्न इज कंसिडर्ड टू बी द एनिमी ऑफ मैनकाइंड। लेकिन अब जिन हालात में लोग जिंदगी गुजार रहे हैं, या जो उनका प्रेजेंट जो सिचुएशन है, जो इनके इंटरेस्ट है, जो उनकी मोटिवेशंस है, उसका हमें इसमें कोई जिक्र नहीं मिलता है। सो इन अ वे इट लैक्स ह्यूमन इंटरेस्ट। देन देयर इज अ लैक ऑफ ह्यूमर. It is very serious. So when we consider that loftiness of style, that grand and sublime style, so definitely जब कोई चीज सीरियस या सोबर होगी तो वो सिर्फ सीरियस और सोबर ही होगी, उसमें ह्यूमर का एलिमेंट नहीं होगा. So it is believed that it lacks humor. Paradise Lost does not contain any elements of humor in it. There is lack of the element of love. Element of love, we don't find human love there, but in the end it would be through the love of Adam that he would be able to restore his position, he would be able to get his seat back. Then Milton uses complex diction and syntax. So another of the defect of his Paradise Lost is the use of complex vocabulary items, complex languages, क्योंकि उसने इस कदर मुश्किल अल्फाज उसमें यूज किए हैं, और जो उसका वर्ड ऑर्डर है, जो उसका अरेंजमेंट ऑफ वर्ड्स है, दैट इज वेरी डिफरेंट फ्रॉम ऑर्डिनरी पोइट्री. वो सिंपल नहीं है, आम इंसान के लिए उसको समझना काफी मुश्किल है. ही यूजेस ट्विस्टेड सेंटेंसेस, वो सेंटेंसेस को इस तरीके से ट्विस्ट किया है कि इट इज समटाइम्स डिफिकल्ट टू अंडरस्टैंड. देन देयर आर इलैबोरेट सिमिलीज, और वो सिमिलीज की डिस्क्रिप्शन इस हद तक चली जाती है कि वी समटाइम्स गेट लॉस्ट कि हम उससे पहले बात क्या हो रही थी. सो दिस इज अनदर कंसिडर्ड टू बी अनदर डिफेक्ट ऑफ हिज Paradise Lost. Then profusion of allusions. It is Paradise Lost is profused with allusions. It is full of classical allusions and mythological allusions. So there are a number of them. तो Paradise Lost को पढ़ते हुए आप एक रिदम में या एक गो में उसको पढ़ नहीं सकते हैं जब तक कि आपको उन सारे रेफरेंसेस के बारे में, उन सारी चीजों के बारे में पता नहीं हो. So you need to look up those references again and again. तो आपको एक जो आपकी continuity है, it breaks that. So in this way it is also considered a defect of Paradise Lost के उसमें जो abundance है allusions की, उस abundance की वजह से it sometimes the readers lose their interest. उनका interest lose हो जाता है, या फिर जो है वो एक continuity के साथ एक rhythm में poetry को, Paradise Lost की lines को जो है, उसकी verses को उस तरीके से नहीं पढ़ सकते, उसको उस तरीके से melodiously उसको enjoy नहीं कर सकते हैं. And then sometimes we have the unnecessary details. Sometimes the details that are not necessary, they are also given. Like we came to know about some of the fallen angels, and then through those angels we came to know about certain other deities and gods, and so some of the details, it is often felt that while reading Paradise Lost that there are unnecessary details also mentioned in Paradise Lost. Since excess of anything is bad, so since most of the critics and most of the predecessors of Milton consider him the greatest of the poets, and they acknowledged his genius. So when you reach such a height of some artistic work, definitely there have to be certain elements on the opposite side also, because when you reach an extreme, definitely there are certain other elements that you lack. Now as we talked about the element of human interest and humor, when it is sublime and serious, when it is sober in its nature, जब उसकी वो universal theme है तो उसमें humor नहीं आ सकता है. So this is the way, this is the reason that in this way there are these defects in Paradise Lost. Otherwise we cannot say that, because it is because of that sublimity of style, because it is because of that grandeur of style, क्योंकि उसका इतना elevated style है और इस तरह से उसमें सारी descriptions दी गई हैं कि उसमें ऐसी चीजों की कोई गुंजाइश नहीं है. If we have a review of lecture 21, we first talked about Paradise Lost, and we talked about the different lines that it included certain speeches, Beelzebub's reply, then finally the building of the pandemonium was there, and finally the council was summoned. Then we talked about the style of Paradise Lost, that it has serious, lofty style, it has sublime, splendid style. Then we discussed the elements of an epic, what is an epic and what are the elements of an epic. We discussed Paradise Lost as an epic. Then we discussed the different points that critics feel that Paradise Lost should not be considered as an epic. We discussed that, and usually it is felt that those objections are useless, they are not purposeful. Then we talked about the elements of Renaissance and Reformation. Like any other writer or individual, he was also influenced by his age and by the preceding age. So he was also influenced by his age, which was the Puritanism, and the age before that was Renaissance. So he embodied this spirit of both these in his Paradise Lost, and they are mixed up so closely together that we do not find that he only belonged to one age. Since he was a Puritan, so those elements are more obvious in Paradise Lost as compared to the elements of Renaissance, but he combines the spirit of both Renaissance and Reformation. Then we talked about the defects of Milton's poetry, that there are certain, in Paradise Lost, there are certain points which critics consider that they make it the defect of his poetry. He lacks certain points in Paradise Lost. With this, we have finished with Milton, with John Milton's Paradise Lost, Book 1. In the next lecture, we shall start with John Donne, who was also a contemporary of John Milton, and he belonged to the metaphysical school of thought. In lecture 22, we will talk about John Donne and his poetry and the characteristic features of his poetry. Allah Hafiz.